This is Joshua Hart here for Seconds Out here today with Gareth A Davies here over Zoom. Gareth, appreciate your time this afternoon. And how is everything?
Always a pleasure. Everything is good, thank you. I notice it's Joshua Hart today, not Josh Hart. Or is it always Joshua?
My legal name is Joshua, but I
Your
just
legal name. Do you have an illegal name as well
but
then?
no, but my nickname is Josh.
Your
So
nickname is Josh. Okay, that's
yeah,
fair enough.
I just switch between both at times.
What
Depends.
would you prefer me to call you then, Josh or Joshua?
Go with Josh. That's the only people who really call me
Okay.
Joshua is my mum and dad.
Okay,
So
lovely. What does your
perfect.
mother call you? Joshua.
Yes,
And she calls you Joshua when she's not happy with you very often, I imagine.
my mother's very happy with me actually.
No, but when she's not happy with you, do you hear Joshua?
Yeah, yeah, more times than not. Yeah.
That's all I meant. Listen, I know you're a sound guy anyway, so I only meant it in terms of if you're called Roy, your mum generally calls you Royston, you know. If you're called Bill, your mum generally calls you William. It's just the way of the world, isn't it? And more often than not, they call you by the full name if they're not happy with you over something.
Absolutely. Well, we'll dive straight into things, Gareth. A big week in boxing as per usual. And a lot of news coming out over the last week or so. We'll start off last night. We saw the news that the British Boxing Board of Control have fined Chris Eubank Jr. £100,000 for the egg slap on Conor Benn. What do you believe a fair punishment is for something like that?
I thought it would be about 25 grand. That's what Derek Chisora was fined for the tables and the altercations with Dillian White a few years back up in Manchester at that raucous press conference. But then again, if he was getting a certain fee, then it was probably a certain percentage. If Chris Eubank is getting if it's a 1% fine, and he was getting if he's getting 10 million for the fight with, I don't know if he has to declare it to them or not, then they've fined him 100,000. I think it's quite steep. If he's being paid extraordinarily well, it probably won't bother him too much. It's ironic because he really helped the promotion. I know even to you, I probably called it a disgrace at the time. He shouldn't have done it with the egg. But look what he generated, because he generated loads of publicity for the event, and yet he gets fined as a result. And you've got people online saying, well, how come Conor Benn's not being fined? He's been fined enough with his legal bill for the last 2.5 years. But if you want to compare it to other fines by commissions or sanctioning bodies, obviously it was before your time, but back in 1997 when Mike Tyson bit the ears of Evander Holyfield, both ears, remember, he was fined $3 million and his license revoked, on what was, I think, a 10% of a 30 million purse. So in some ways, maybe Chris has got off lightly, but he hasn't had his license revoked. Obviously, they think he has brought the sport into disrepute, and they fined him accordingly.
Ben Shalom revealed to my colleague Eamon Khan last week that Chris Eubank Jr. won't be weighing in any later than 10 a.m. for the second day weigh-in after contesting it with Team Ben. How big of an advantage does the time of the second day weigh-in give to Conor Ben?
It does, and it was something that I think I raised with you, that we need to know the time of that. If you recall, we talked about it. I've raised it with a few people. I'm glad it's out there. Well done, Eamon. Well done, Eamon Khan, for asking that question. I think he's still got to go through a tough Friday where he's got to stay at 170, or weigh in at 160 rather. He can replenish his body by 10 pounds. Because I'm assuming that they might well weigh in at 160 in the morning of the Friday. They might have a I don't know if I don't know if he was asked whether 160 is the early weigh-in, whether it's a ceremonial weigh-in on the Friday in the afternoon. So does he have to stay at 160 for 24 hours? Or sorry, has he got to stay at 160 for a very long period? And that is that 10 pounds going to be added to his body over 24 hours or not? That's interesting to know. When he gets in the dressing room, I'm sure he'll be 5, 6 pounds heavier anyway. So he'll probably be in there at 176, 180, probably a little bit lighter than he's used to. Even though he's made middleweight for those fights with Liam Smith in the last, what is that, in the last 2 years. And obviously made the weight for Zeramata. I think that was at 160 as well against Kamil Zeramata in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. So look, he's used to doing it. I think it's a tough ask for him because he's got bigger. He's not a small guy. And Conor Benn's not going to have to worry about weight at all. He's not going to have to lose any weight. And so there are some weight advantages here with Conor Benn in terms of the weight cut. Whether that transfers itself to the fight, late in the fight, if it's a grueling contest, we're yet to know. But I think more than anything, what we need to know is whether Chris Eubank still has the vim and vigour in him to really want to box hard in a fight where a smaller, younger, but very determined man is coming at him. There were some signs, I'd said it at the time, against Kamil Zeramata, that maybe Chris is feeling age a little bit. A lot of people have commented on that as well since, and I'm of the opinion that may have been the case, but it also may have been the case that he felt that Kamil Zeramata wasn't on his level and wasn't really up in the way that he will be for this bloodline feud.
Moving away from that, we saw some more big news last week that Dana White and Turki Alalshikh have partnered up by bringing the TKO Group into boxing. From what you know, from what you've seen, what are your initial thoughts on this move?
I think we talked about this last week.
We did not, 'cause we spoke before that.
Oh,
We
did we? It was
we spoke. I
before
think
that.
we
Okay.
spoke Tuesday last week.
Well, my feelings, and I've done several interviews on this and done two radio shows for Talk Sport on this. Fight Night and Fight Night Extra, where we've gone into a lot of detail. Look, my feeling is that Turki Alalshikh has given a mandate to the most powerful man in MMA, one of the most powerful promoters in combat sports, in Dana White, to create a streamlined division or league with 8 champions of the world, the top 20 in the world being assessed, the top 5 fighting over the belt, 1 champion. But I think all it's going to do is create more champions in different weight divisions. It may be the most recognised one in the end, but I think they've got a lot of work to do. It'll be fascinating as it rolls out. The fact that Turki Alalshikh has said they're going to crush the other leagues, I think, is a very strident and strong message to send out there. Maybe unnecessary, I don't know, given that he's working with all the other promoters, all the other notable promoters, bar Al Heyman. So you've got Eddie Hearn, Frank Warren, George Warren, Oscar De La Hoya, Bob Arum, Todd Dubois, all these guys he's working with, Ben Shalom. I think they may need to work with them all again if they're going to get the very best, because are they going to be on DAZN? Are they going to have their own platform? Is it true, as rumoured, that they may get the ESPN deal? And if so, will it be more America focused? Will they be trialling it with Saul Canelo Alvarez versus Terence Crawford in September in Las Vegas? These are all fascinating points to go over at the moment. And the big talking point as well is, for 18 months, Turki Alalshikh has helped to fix boxing in lots of ways, and make it less broke than it was if boxing is broken. It's certainly nuanced, and it's certainly fractured in some ways, rather than completely broken, because it still works as a Wild West. But it's fascinating the direction he's gone in terms of giving a mandate to Dana White.
You covered a UFC a hell of a lot of times now in your career, Gareth. Obviously, you know a lot more about Dana White than what I presume most people in boxing, especially fans, probably know. What can the fans expect from Dana White as he moves into boxing?
Well, as he said, six words: the best will fight the best, and I get that, and he's always been about that precept that's what he believes in, and conceptually that's what they've created with the UFC, which obviously is an extraordinarily successful organisation. He's got a very far reach and great power as a promoter. He's brilliant at what he does. As you say, I've interviewed him on a personal level many times. I know Dana White, I would say, fairly well professionally, and he's brilliant at what he does. And in many ways, some of what Eddie Hearn's done is a mirror image of that by creating his own media company around Matchroom. And Dana White's and the Fertitta brothers, Lorenzo and Frank, who were with him at the beginning, created a brilliant entity that obviously joined with WWE and Endeavor, and it's worth, I thought it was 12 billion, but I'm told it's 20 billion as a company. Nick Khan's there as the CEO and understands boxing, and a lot of the agents and artists that work in boxing as the CEO of WWE. Look at, I mean, Turki Alalshikh has gone to very powerful people. And as I say, the mandate that he's given them are because they are proven in creating a company from scratch that has become very, very big. How long has it taken them? 25 to 30 years to do that. So this thing won't happen overnight. But if Turki Al-Sheikh wants to invest as much money as he has with TKO in what he's done generically with boxing in the last year and a half, we can expect it to be very, very powerful. But will boxing, as we see it right now, go away? No, it's always going to be there as long as the other characters that I mentioned want to be involved. What's going to be fascinating is how often and when all these parties are going to work together. That's what I'm looking forward to seeing. I mean, I sat down with Eddie Hearn last Friday for only for 7 or 8 minutes, and his take was his output was, I'm very excited to see a new agency involved in the sport, and that was fascinating in itself. Whether it works for him, I don't know, but he's obviously got a very powerful position on the DAZN platform. The top line was that he was paid $1 billion 7 years ago by Len Blavatnik and DAZN to create the biggest platform ever for boxing. Game Changed, if you remember, it was called, and they were going to use guerrilla warfare in the new Netflix of boxing, and I think they have become that. And I think they're growing all the time, but Eddie Hearn's still got a year on that to run, I think. So he's in a strong position. Frank Warren's just signed with them. Oscar De La Hoya's on there. They're talking about 185 events a year. So they're not going to struggle for events. And I just wonder, to go back to the Johnny Fisher, Dave Allen press conference last week. They're expecting 8,000 at the Copper Box. It's a really good fight for the British fans. It caused controversy the first time. Is that the kind of event Dana White and Turki Al-Sheikh are going to show any interest in? I'm not sure. But there's lots of levels to boxing, and also sometimes the number one in the world against the number five in the world is not what excites fans in some divisions at certain times. It's purely the matchups. So I think the matchmaking is going to be as key as world title fights and who's the number one. Look at Agit Kabayel and Zhile Zhang in Riyadh recently. What a fascinating fight. Joseph Parker and Martin Bakole. Anyway, I will let you ask a question because I'm going on and on. But I spent a lot of time talking and thinking about it last week, and all it's done is make boxing more fascinating. Do you agree or not?
I think it is more fascinating because obviously, as being a bit of a UFC fan myself, it is interesting. So I know Dana has always had an interest in boxing and has worked in boxing in small bits and pieces. But to see him really come in now, and it looks like he's going to be the main powerhouse to it. Obviously, it looks like with the relationship him and Turkey have. The one bit I find interesting and I guess this has come from the aftermath of seeing the reaction. I want to get your thoughts on this. Is it seems Dana wants to implement that UFC model of one champion per weight division. You said you feel it's going to create more champions. We've seen Mauricio Sullivan speak out and say that, you know, let's say I can't remember what he quite said, but we've seen WBC champions also come out and say that they bleed green and gold, kind of standing in union with Mauricio Sullivan. How do you feel this will affect the current landscape that we've got now with this four belt system?
Well, to answer your question about Dana and then the four belt system, I think we'll have five belts. It'll be as simple as that. And maybe we'll have the Ring Magazine belt as well. If they aren't going to do the Ring Magazine belt as a TKO belt, we need the ranking system. Where's that going to come from? Obviously, they need to have their own ranking system. I can't see the sanctioning bodies just going away unless they become inculcated into one system, and everyone's agreed on that and they all work together under the same company, if you like. But you know, whether how do you build that? How do you finesse the egos inside that? For me, for a while, I think there's going to be more belts until people either do or don't recognise what is the TKO belt or not. There's also the other thing to think about, to consider, which is, like you say, some boxers have come out and said they bleed green and gold. I haven't read those comments, but if you say that, then I will look for them afterwards and have a look. But I think loyalty can always be tested by the sums of money people are going to be paid. My feeling is, yes, the fans may benefit from that, but without the boxers, we are nothing. They are the most important people in all of this. If they're being paid better, great. If it's harder to become a world champion, but you're going to be paid well to be, even if you're number on a sliding scale of, you know, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in the division, great. But the remuneration and the payment for fighters is always going to be important. Now, the UFC has been virtually a monopoly, hasn't it, for a long time? It is the most powerful force in MMA. UFC is almost literally MMA, or was for a very long time. You know, I've worked with Bellator and I've worked with PFL, and you know that they are always second best to the UFC in terms of size, revenue, global audience, all those things. I mean, they're incredibly successful. Their TV rights around the world, all those things, the canonical ownership by the UFC of their own media franchise is extraordinary, way ahead of its time. And also, of course, it's been a pathfinder, a lightning rod for change as well. And that's why I say Eddie Hearn is following some of the mores that they put together. Same as when you speak to Todd Dubois, he's saying we needed to make boxing more exciting at events and light shows and all those things that the UFC do so brilliantly, and the big screen building up to the next fight. So all of these things that they're you're undeniably brilliant at. The most important thing, and one of the things that the UFC has been challenged over in the past, is fighter pay and treatment of the fighters. I think, you know, they are always rewarding the marketability of fighters. So I think there is a market economy, and I think they'll follow it. I just think it's fascinating how it's all going to play out. And I think we've discussed every single thing that's within the apex of it happening right now. And you know, there are some, what we can't predict is on how the four sanctioning bodies, the major promoters in the world, are going to work or not with TKO, Dana White and Turki Alalshikh. We understand there's time on their dealings to still go, and maybe they're all going to work together for a while, and the world will eventually, or the boxing world will eventually find its place in all these things. And I think, again, market forces will dictate who rises to the top in it.
One thing was that I mentioned earlier is that it seems Dana White is going to start becoming a bit of a powerhouse in the boxing world, especially with this relationship that he has with Turki Alalshikh. How big of a threat could Dana and TKO be to the current promoters working with Turki Alalshikh?
Well, I think I've answered that already. I think threat is the wrong word, because I don't think anybody is feeling threatened. Last weekend there were 50 to 60 events around the world, okay? Now, then those boxing isn't going to go away because they're going to do because they're going to do their own league. They're only going to do the top level. There's still you can't just appear suddenly and be a star in boxing. You need to create that star. You need to grow that star. You need to elevate that star. You need to promote that star. So don't forget, there's a conveyor belt of talent that comes through all the time. One of the things I think he should be doing is helping boxing to get back into the Olympics. It's not something he's been interested in so far, Turki Alalshikh, but he could again become a further legend in the sport by obviously he's become a massive and influential figure over the last 18 months. But to help boxing get back into the Olympics is really important because the amateur side of the sport is really important. I don't care what anyone says. The amateurs, everybody starts somewhere. No one suddenly emerges as a world-class fighter just like that. They start as an amateur. Very often, as you've got a love of boxing. You'll know your local club. You've boxed a little bit. You start with a local, maybe amateur coach that's given up 20, 30, 40 years of their evenings to coach people because they love the sport and they're often not paid for it. And we've got a terrible track record in this country, governmentally, of not supporting a lot of the clubs. I mean, I'm sure I told you about it before that Imran Hussain is doing things as the MP of, I can't remember where it is, Bradford, it might be Bradford or Barnsley, is doing great things, trying to get government to invest in the amateur boxing clubs around the country because they get no statutory money from exchequer funding at the moment. So I think that's where I'd like to see development as well. We've got the Dana White Contender Series. He plucks fighters in MMA. He plucks fighters from all over the place, and it's almost like a World's Got Talent MMA show. They may do that with boxing as well and create new stars, which I'm sure they will. But there's so many different feeder leagues going on around the world and small hall shows, as I say, 50 odd shows over the year. I feel like I've got verbal diarrhea today, but there's so much to talk about. It's so complex. You're talking about the whole fabric and infrastructure of the sport rather than it be an easy headline that promoters are under threat or sanctioning bodies are under threat, or the broadcast world is not under threat. It's been around for decades. The promoters have been around for decades, the leading promoters. The sanctioning bodies have been around for decades. Professional boxing's been around 160 years. And the Ring magazine's been around for 100 years. So, there's history here. And history, there's an established, people might not agree with how the established formats work, but if you can go back to the beginning and do it from ground zero, great. But I think it's more complicated than a lot of people think. I'm exhausted. I'm exhausted thinking about it.
Just one interesting point that I like you highlighted there is obviously getting boxing back involved with the Olympics and more funding needed for the amateur clubs, especially when we're seeing amateur clubs. We've seen what Matchroom have done in terms of funding the reopening of some amateur clubs. Do you feel not just Turkey, but we could see more just from the professional boxing side, do more for these amateur clubs, especially when we're seeing them close all around the.
I think they already do, and it's unsung what they do. I know Frank Warren raises money for charity, and when I asked him about being involved when I went to see Imran Hussain with Alex Gavel at Portcullis House in Westminster a couple of months back, or it might have been last year now. When I mentioned it to Frank Warren, he was totally behind it. Anything that he could do for it, very happy to do. He's always built from the ground up. Bob Arum's always built from the ground up. They select guys that come out of the Olympics. Richard Schaefer used to do the same for Golden Boy. It's already there. It's not like boxing has been negated and ignored, and we have gone through a revolution with Turki Alalshikh in the last 18 months. He's put a lot of money into the heavyweight division and into funding brilliant events that we've all benefited from in the sport. And it's been a pleasure to witness and be involved in. But, they're trying to shift the paradigm now, and I get it. He's got a vision, and I get it. But boxing is already established and going down a certain route. If they don't agree with it, it's got no world governing body, so you can create a shift in boxing by being involved in it in that way. But it's a new paradigm, as I say. But there is still work. There's always work to be done in every sport, at every level, in every country, at every level. Whether it be fighting poverty and homelessness, or whether it be fighting drug problems and issues with youth not being active enough, whatever it is. And I think you can always find holes in boxing because it is the Wild West. But believe you me, there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes to create the stars that we see that present on the very biggest of stages.
Just last few quick ones from me. Just quickly that I've
You
seen
need
now.
more? You need more?
Not on TKO, not on TKO. Just a few away from that. One of them I've just seen now. That apparently Chris Eubank Jr. has appealed the fine from the British Boxing Board of Control. Right move from him.
Yeah, he doesn't want to pay 100 grand. Where's the precedent for 100 grand? I think Cash Ali was fined 20,000 or 10,000, half his purse or whatever, for the ear biting. Remember the ear biting in recent times? Yeah, I mean, it's up to him to appeal. I mean, if he feels it's harsh, that's fine. And I think he might be making the point: why am I being punished when Conor Benn has gone through 2 years of issues with you, and he's not even being fined by you. But as I said at the beginning, Conor Benn has had to pay massive legal fees, and he's revealed that himself. I look forward to the pair of them and watching the pair of them speaking on the Piers Morgan Uncensored show on Friday. That'll be a lot of fun.
That will be very good. Daniel Dubois, he's faced a lot of criticism for what it seems like that he's going to be facing Alexander Usyk next instead of going back to Joseph Parker and giving him the shot. Do you feel this is
Well, what
fair
I know is
criticism?
sorry.
Do you feel the criticism that Daniel Dubois is getting for looking like he's going down to Usyk? Do you feel it's fair or unfair criticism?
Well, it is what it is. He was ill on the week. He was pulled out. So the doctors at the Boxing Board of Control, Dr. Neil Scott, the head of the chief medical officer of the board, pulled him out. You can't do anything about it. We understand he has this glandular issue that is surfaces when he's under high stress. Saw Daniel on Saturday, Young Boxer of the Year at the Boxing Board of Control Awards. It's very odd. He was there early on, but then wasn't there to pick up his award, which was unusual. But I think, as I spoke to Frank Warren a couple of weeks ago in the wake of the events in Riyadh on the February 22nd last Crescendo card, and he said they were looking potentially at putting him in with Oleksandr Usyk next for the undisputed title in a stadium, either in the UK or in Riyadh. We'll see what happens, were Frank's words. In June, July, that kind of time this summer. So looks like it's going ahead. Criticism unfair? It is what it is. He was ill in fight week. He must have been fairly ill or not able to compete because the doctor ruled him out. Very often it's the opposite. Someone can have a stitch on their head and they'll cover it with hair, or stitches on their head because they've cut themselves in training because they're being very well paid. You can see it as you want to, but I don't believe the conspiracy theories. I think he was genuinely ill.
Another rumor that has been circling around the world of
You
social.
love a rumor, don't you?
Well, this one's an interesting one because I've got a bit of an interest in this one. There's rumors that Deontay Wilder will be returning and taking on the WBC interim heavyweight champion Agit Kabayel next. How dangerous is this type of matchup at this stage and the run of form that Wilder's been on?
Well, it's only dangerous for Deontay Wilder. Agit Kabayel looks amazing at the moment. Look what he's done on his latest run. Arslanbek Makhmudov, Frank Sanchez and Zhilei Zhang. Is that right? The last three? He's looked brilliant in those three fights, all in Riyadh, all in Riyadh as well. Yeah,
Yes.
he's very close to fighting for a world title in my view. I see him as a huge favourite against Deontay Wilder, unless Deontay Wilder's just picked up a magic wand again and is back to his very best. He does look like he certainly looked like he couldn't pull the trigger in the last couple of fights, particularly against Zhile Zhang. He hasn't fought since then, has he? I don't think. Even though I've got a feeling he's fought because there's a narrative out there on social media that he's been fighting. We shall see. I mean, at the moment, Usyk 1. If Fury is going to come back 2, Daniel Dubois 3, Joseph Parker 4, Agit Kabayel 5 in the world, or number 4 if you do it like the ring does with champion and then 1 being the first challenger. So he's right up there for me. Very hard fight for Deontay Wilder, and all it does is continue to augment Agit Kabayel and keep him treading water and in the running.
Last one from me.
What, another one?
That last one, Gareth.
What's this? The Wednesday rinse?
I just like talking boxing, Gareth. It's what we're here for. It seems that Joyce is taking on Filip Hrgovic next. A lot of major betting sites are now displaying odds for this unannounced matchup. How do you see a fight playing out with Joyce and Hrgovic?
It's a massive opportunity for Joyce to get back in the rankings, more so than if he fought Dillian Whyte, who I hope gets very well soon after crushing his finger. And I'd love to see Dillian back soon as well. But the opportunity against Filip Hrgovic, who is still, in my view, ranked in the top 10 in the heavyweight division. This is the opportunity that Joe may not get again. So he's got to take it with both hands. It's a very difficult fight. Daniel Dubois showed what can be done against Filip Hrgovic in a brilliant performance. So I think it's a great opportunity for Joe, and I think he will take it with both hands. And it's a really good matchup as well.
Well, Gareth, I will leave it there now. Thank you very much for your time this afternoon. Always good to catch up, and I look forward to speaking again soon.
I was only teasing you. It's always a pleasure to speak to you, Joshua Hart.
Thank you very much, Gareth.